World War II forced every major nation to rush tank development at an unprecedented pace. While some designs became legendary, many others failed spectacularly due to poor planning, weak engines, outdated concepts, or battlefield realities they could not survive. Some tanks looked powerful on paper, but collapsed under real combat conditions. In this video, we explore the most important failed tank. The Panzer I was never intended to fight enemy tanks. It was originally designed as a training vehicle to prepare German crews for future armored warfare. However, due to rapid expansion and lack of alternatives, it was rushed into combat. Armed only with machine guns and protected by thin armor, the Panzer I was helpless against enemy armor and artillery, suffering heavy losses early in the war. The Panzer II was meant as a temporary solution until stronger tanks became available. Although it featured a small cannon, it quickly became outdated. Against modern enemy tanks, its armor and firepower were insufficient. While useful early in reconnaissance roles, it failed as a frontline combat tank. Germany experimented with multi-turret tank designs before the war. The WWII looked intimidating, but was mechanically complex and unreliable. Its size made it an easy target, and its multiple turrets offered no real tactical advantage. The design was abandoned after limited propaganda use. The Maus was the heaviest tank ever constructed during World War II. While its armor was nearly impenetrable, its enormous weight created massive problems. It moved slowly, consumed huge amounts of fuel, and could not cross most bridges. The tank became more of an engineering curiosity than a usable weapon. Britain's TOG II was designed using outdated World War I thinking. It was long, slow, and excessively tall, making it an easy target. Modern mobile warfare had no place for such a sluggish machine, and the design was abandoned. The Covenanter suffered from severe overheating problems. Its engine design made it unreliable even during training exercises. Because of these flaws, it never saw combat outside Britain. The Crusader was fast but mechanically unreliable. In the harsh desert environment, engine failures were common. Despite large production numbers, its flaws limited effectiveness. The Char B1 was heavily armored and powerful on paper. However, its complicated layout required excessive crew coordination. Poor communication and slow speed made it ineffective during fast-moving German attacks. Once revolutionary, the FT-17 was outdated by WWII. Its thin armor and slow speed made it defenseless against modern weapons. Thousands were lost or abandoned during early battles. The Samua S-35 was one of the best French tanks on paper. It had strong armor, good mobility, and a capable gun for its time. However, its biggest weakness was reliability. Maintenance was extremely difficult, and French crews often lacked spare parts. Most importantly, the absence of radios prevented coordination, making the tank ineffective in fast-moving battles. The Hotchkiss tanks were heavily armored for light tanks, but they suffered from poor mobility. Their weak engines made them slow and difficult to maneuver. Additionally, one-man turrets overloaded the commander, reducing battlefield effectiveness. The Soviet T-35 was designed to intimidate enemies with multiple turrets. In reality, it was mechanically unreliable and extremely difficult to maintain. Most T-35 tanks were lost due to breakdowns rather than enemy fire, proving the design was a failure. The BT-7 prioritized speed above all else. While fast, it had thin armor and poor survivability. Enemy anti-tank weapons could destroy it easily, making speed an insufficient advantage. The KV-2 mounted a massive gun intended to destroy bunkers. However, its enormous turret made it unstable and slow. Turret rotation was painfully slow, making it vulnerable to flanking attacks. The T-26 was already outdated when the war began. Its thin armor and weak gun offered little protection against German tanks. Large numbers were lost during the opening stages of Operation Barbarossa. The Type 95 was designed for speed and jungle warfare. Unfortunately, its armor was extremely thin. Even small arms fire could penetrate it, making it ineffective against Allied forces. The Type 97 Kaiha was Japan's main medium tank. By the time it faced American Shermans, it was completely outmatched. Its weak gun and armor made survival nearly impossible. Japan attempted to build the massive OI Super Heavy tank. Its enormous size created logistical nightmares. The project was cancelled before any combat deployment. Italy's L-335 tankette was badly underarmed and lightly armored. It was vulnerable to infantry weapons and artillery. Against modern tanks, it stood no chance at all. Italy's Semovent 7518 was intended as a mobile artillery piece. While effective against infantry and bunkers, its thin armor made it extremely vulnerable to enemy tanks. The lack of a turret reduced flexibility, leaving crews exposed during frontal assaults. Its battlefield impact was limited, and it could not change the course of battles. The Italian P-2640 was their attempt at a medium tank. Unfortunately, it was slow, underpowered, and produced in extremely limited numbers. By the time it reached combat, Allied forces had already outclassed it with superior armor and firepower. The Soviet T-28 was a multi-turret medium tank. Although it looked intimidating, the complex design caused mechanical failures and poor maneuverability. In the face of German blitzkrieg, these tanks were quickly destroyed or abandoned. The T-37 and T-38 were amphibious light tanks. While innovative, their armor was minimal, and they could not survive even light artillery fire. Used mostly for reconnaissance, they failed to influence frontline battles. Sweden's SDRV M42 was a domestically designed medium tank. Though mechanically reliable, it was slow and underarmed compared to German and Soviet designs. It never left Sweden, highlighting how some failed tanks were due to strategic irrelevance rather than technical flaws. The CV-33 and CV-35 were tiny Italian tankettes, almost paper-thin in armor. They were fast but could not resist machine guns or artillery. Large numbers were lost in North Africa, proving their ineffectiveness in modern warfare. The British Vickers light tank was designed for colonial policing, not modern war. Thin armor and light guns made it obsolete by 1939. Against German armor, it was almost completely ineffective. The WWII was a massive, slow, multi-turret British tank. By the time it was built, warfare had shifted to mobility and combined arms. It could barely move and never saw combat. Early versions of the Panzer 38T were mechanically sound but lacked firepower. As German campaigns expanded, it became insufficient against newer Allied tanks. It was eventually upgraded or replaced in frontline service. The first Panzer III models carried only a 37 gun, ineffective against modern enemy armor. While mechanically reliable, they were outclassed on the battlefield. Upgrades later improved the design, but these early failures illustrate how rushed tank programs led to wasted resources. Early Panzer IV models were designed as infantry support tanks, not for tank battles. Equipped with a short-barreled 75 gun, they struggled against even medium Allied tanks. Despite strong armor, their low firepower limited battlefield effectiveness until upgrades arrived. The first Panther tanks were rushed into production to counter the Soviet T-34. Mechanical failures were frequent, with engines and suspensions breaking down easily. Crews often spent more time repairing than fighting, proving the dangers of hurried design. The Tiger I, a symbol of German heavy armor, initially suffered from severe mechanical issues. Engines, transmissions, and tracks often failed in combat. While its gun was deadly, early models were logistical nightmares. The King Tiger combined heavy armor with a long 88 gun. However, its immense weight caused breakdowns and destroyed bridges. Very few reached front lines intact, making it more a technical marvel than an effective tank. Panzerjäger I was Germany's first tank destroyer. Built on a Panzer I chassis, it carried a 47-man anti-tank gun. Its thin armor and exposed crew made it highly vulnerable, limiting its impact on battles. Japan's medium tank prototypes often prioritized novelty over combat effectiveness. Thin armor, weak guns, and poor mobility rendered many experimental designs useless. These tanks never left the drawing board in meaningful number. The OI was one of the largest experimental tanks of the war. Its size created transport nightmares, and the crew would be exposed if hit. Only a prototype existed, highlighting how ambition exceeded practicality. The Italian L-335 tankette remained too lightly armored and underarmed. It could not survive artillery or even heavy machine gun fire. It was completely outclassed by more modern Allied tanks. The CV-33 and CV-35 were extremely small, fast, and lightly armored. Their only advantage was mobility, but against tanks or artillery, they were almost useless. Many were destroyed within days of deployment. The Vickers light tank was intended for colonial policing rather than war. Its armor could not resist modern anti-tank weapons. It became completely obsolete during the early stages of WWII. The massive British TOG II tank was designed for trench warfare that never existed. Its enormous size made it impractical, slow, and vulnerable. It never saw combat, proving it to be a failed design experiment. Even late Panzer 38T models could not compete with newer Allied tanks. While mechanically reliable, their small gun and thin armor limited battlefield impact. They were relegated to secondary roles before being phased out entirely. Finally, the late Panzer III models were upgraded with larger guns. However, by this time, they were already outclassed by T-34s and Shermans. Despite upgrades, their relevance in frontline combat had effectively ended.